Hello, everybody. Thank you for jumping in. As per usual, welcome to the lecture series of the University of the Underground Music Incubator Program. The University of the Underground was founded in February 2017 and is a free, pluralistic, and transnational university based in the basement of nightclubs and actively working with both institutions and nightlife. As part of Toward the Moon, the University of the Underground is running a music incubator program from October to December that provides practical challenges and opportunities for young music makers to develop their crafts, as well as a series of lectures on music making and political and cultural theory. So tonight we have Daria again, which you've already had the pleasure of meeting. And it's also a great opportunity for me to remind all of our participants that on November 23rd is the deadline to send over your notation, your participation to this songbook. So this lecture from Daria is, I hope, a good inspiration for what you'll be sending over before that date. So I'll let Daria present himself, and you can also present yourself visually. That would be great for those who might have some problems seeing you. So for example, my name is Chloe, I'm white, I have a blue sweater, and I'm blonde. And Daria, I'll let you present yourself in the same way.
Hi, I'm Daria. I have wild hair, it's black, and I'm wearing a black sweater. Glad to be here for the second week. Should I just get right into it then? Okay, I'm going to share the screen. If everybody, let's see. Can everybody see this?
Perfect.
Okay. Well, okay, great. So I'm going to continue off last week, but instead of focusing on only Western Europe, I kind of extended the scope to all of Eurasia. I wanted to start with some very broad generalizations that you may or may not agree with during the course of this lecture, but I wanted to challenge you anyways. Since we're going to be dealing with traditional and folk systems, there are certain things to keep in mind with regards to notation. And the first is that most of the music, if not all of it, has been orally transmitted throughout millennia from master to student. And every culture that I will present you has a name for a master-student relationship. So notation has not been at the core of musical practice. These musics are sometimes heavily tied to a ritualistic tradition, either religious, spiritual, or just societal. They have generally evolved from poetic meters, at least melodically speaking. So many of the notations can be based off of poetry, for example. And most of this music has also been formalized at one point in each culture's respective history, usually through folk music that made its way to the court. And bards and wandering musicians, workers would inspire themselves off of work songs and agricultural work songs they would hear in the countryside. Gentlemen scholars or ladies of the court, so any kind of erudite would then either want to transcribe this music or talk about it in a written context. There's also the question of, as we will see, mathematical exploration of sounds that have been going on since antiquity, not just a European practice. And to kind of go along with that, historically speaking, throughout Eurasia, there has been a very heavy tradition of an intersection between music, mathematics, and mysticism, so any kind of spiritual or cosmological considerations, as we will see. And finally, very important, if not the most important, that since the colonial period, since European colonization, there have been a lot of outside influences that have come to either syncretize with these musics or have been rejected. And notation can be a reflection of that. So we're going to start in China. Very, very ancient, profound, deep musical tradition. And very broadly speaking, there are three categories of notational systems as delineated in the book Music of the Billions. One of them is tablature. And I've provided some image-based examples. Second category is pitched. Gongchepu is actually very interesting because it is the one that influenced Korean and Japanese notational systems that unfortunately we don't have time to delve deeper in. To both tablature and pitched notations do not include rhythmic, precise rhythmic details, only very broad rhythmic schemes. As you can see, the Chinese do have a format from going top to bottom. And the third, cipher notation is it's a contemporary and it's most widely used today. This does include precise rhythmic details indicated by dots. And finally, less used but still prevalent, graphic notation, as evidenced by these very curved linear lines. This example is taken from the book Music of the Billions, but they had inverted the picture in the text, which is why the text appears backwards. I wanted to focus very briefly on Gongchepu since it's quite prevalent. And I wanted to share an example of what to be careful of if you ever come across notation systems that you are not familiar with. This kind of transliteration is to be avoided. Do not ever, at least in my opinion, do not ever transliterate tones or notes from one tuning system or one musical practice to another, that being Western Occidental, because they do not correspond and they give a false idea of what the music sounds like and the relationship between the notes. So if anything during this lecture, I would really hope for you to remember that. This is kind of a better chart to be found that would, if you just ignore the upper part of the 12 equally tempered tones, you could still derive a lot of information because the solfege syllables are a better indication of relatively where the notes lie, because you don't transpose your system, you don't conceptually transpose your system of thinking to a Occidental one as much as you would by looking at a musically notated graph. And finally, this is a more accurate description of how this notation system works. It is a set of symbols that show the relationship of the notes in relation to each other, much like a scale, not exactly a scale. So 1 would be your fundamental tone, 2 would be the distance between from 1, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's better to think of it that way. And here is what a score would look like. This is a regional variant, Gongchepu. So there are many, maybe I omitted that. There's a lot of regional variants for each notation. They're not at all standardized. They just have overall symmetry and patterns that correlate from one another. I wanted to include a not very well-known notation system from Tibet, but very beautiful nonetheless. Very graphic in nature. We unfortunately do not know much about it, the international community at large. I put two quotes from 1975, a book written in 1975 that kind of illustrates our general ignorance on Yang notation. But nonetheless, it exists and it's very beautiful. There was a doctoral thesis written in 2009 that did delve deeper into how this notation works, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But from what we do know, these lines present some sort of melodic direction, and the text are hymns and chants of the Buddhist traditions with sometimes additional instrumentation, but no rhythmic indications at all. And moving down from Tibet, down the Himalayas into India, another very ancient and profound tradition of music that dates, is one of the most well-documented, along with the Chinese systems, one of the most well-documented musical systems in the world, because we can trace it back to the Vedic texts that describe how to chant the hymns. I think this image is kind of self-explanatory. So move on. From the Vedic texts evolved the music, and then quite later notation system. The most famous one, India, most commonly people divide Indian classical music into two different systems, the North and the South, or better referred to as Hindustani for the North and Carnatic for the South. And each have similar but different ways of notating their music, as well as interpreting the musical elements of what they play. But there's still a lot of similarities between them. They tend to use the Hindi alphabet, or the alphabet of their local culture, since there are many, along with a series of dots and slurs and ties that would show, that would have rhythmic indications. And also, if we higher the pitch or we lower the pitch, as illustrated, as illustrated in the second photo to the right, to the bottom right, for example. So if you see on the S and R, for example, there are dots on top of it. Hindustani music is usually notated in what is called Bakhtiari notation. He was a composer and musician that detailed this system, including the lyrics of what is to be sung, the ornamentation. So there, if you see, there are grace notes on the bottom, on the top left, and as well as the notes. The tempo is indicated by the rhythm and tempo are indicated by patterns, basic patterns called tals, which give the interpreters a foundation on which to further improvise on. So it's not an exactly super detailed notation like you would find in the West, but it is nevertheless, some argue, more effective. In the South, so in the Carnatic tradition, as I was saying before, you have these dots on top of letters and on the bottom. Just a little caveat, sometimes they do notate their music using Latin script. This is due to British colonization of India. But usually it'll be in Tamil, for example. Right, so we have the indication of octaves. So that's the pitch, where the pitch is placed. The note names. Certain lines and dashes to show you ornamentation. And So moving to the West now, the Iranian tradition is an interesting one for its, some would say its disuse, its unuse of notation. Iranian musicians and composers throughout the ages have found it unnecessary to notate their music, if not inhibitory towards the practice. But during the Islamic, what is referred to as the Islamic Golden Age, Iran was very influenced by the ideas coming from the Arab world, and wholeheartedly delve into research in all fields, and music as well. Most of these texts that I'm about to show you were written in Arabic by Persian scholars. Normally, I would not differentiate Iran and the Arab world during this time because they were one and the same, but for matters of, for matters relating to the systems, because they are different, I decided to include one section on Iranian, one section on Arabic. One of the most famous texts, it's called The Great Book of Music by Al-Farabi. And Al-Farabi wrote this as part of a wider collection of musical writings to kind of capture what was going on at the time and to further musical research. So any notation that comes is purely theoretical and is not meant to be interpreted by performers or composers. This is a picture of an oud and the different notes and frets and tuning systems that are possible on the oud. The Perso-Arabic way of notating pitches was called abjad, based off of the script letters themselves. After Ibn Farabi comes Ibn Sina, another very famous philosopher of the period. You can kind of see more mathematical relationships that he delineates between intervals and tones, and also on the instrument itself. This continued on, this thread of thought kind of continued on to influence other thinkers that came after it, like Ormavi, who organized a theory of scales, of Persian scales used at the time, into this very beautiful, much like we would think of like what the circle of fifths are. There was a lot of experimentation in the Arab world at the time along those very lines, if not influencing the West later on during the Renaissance. Shirazi's whose name means of Shiraz, is another famous thinker who kind of experimented with this kind of box notation that we find today in contemporary music as well, where the instruments and performance directions are kind of organized in this matrix format that is meant to be read like a linear time, scale. And finally, I did want to tie in really quick what I was saying about music, mathematics, and mysticism. Here's an excellent idea. This is called the circle of lovers. Lovers is meant to be taken not literally, but spiritually. So maybe your spiritual love or your relationship with God at the time. In the 20th century, the British and United States took a heavy interest in Iran because of its tobacco industry, and also because oil started to become discovered. And came an influx of exchanges between these three cultures, and the Iranians, notably Vaziri, had this idea of, well, we should notate our music just as precisely as Western music does, so we can preserve the thousands of years of music we have without the danger of it being lost. So they kind of invented a similar way of notating, but because Iranian music, like Indian music and Arabic music, uses intervals that are smaller than a semitone, they needed to find a way of more generally notating what microtone to play. And so they come up with Koron and Sori, and they kind of fit in just like they do on an Occidental score. If not, this is an Occidental score. But what you can notice is that if you listen to Iranian music, or any music that is not Western, you will see you'll quickly come to terms with the rhythmic poverty that of Western notation. So even though there has been a heavy emphasis more and more on notating, Iranians notating their music using Western notation, it is still necessary to train with a master and have a master-student relationship in order to accurately transmit all the melodic patterns and melodies and styles of playing Iranian music. So if you want, this is more in the vein of a mnemonic device, which could be a little easier to read depending on your education and your upbringing. Moving on to the Arabic world, same time period. Al-Kindi, kind of the philosopher that is if you want, the intellectual father of all these musical philosophers, wrote a very famous book that we have fragments of, where he details in letter script many of the directions of how to play a piece of music. It's kind of hefty, as you can see, and not really musical. So it's purely theoretical. So it's not meant to be read by musicians, but just a way of seeing the music on a written format. It was a first experiment. But this idea kind of caught on, and people experimented. So you get all these beautiful graphs. Could not find the author of this book, but the book is Shajarat al-Tawu, and it is a treatise on the knowledge of melodies. I will personally dedicate part of my research to finding out what this book is, and maybe potentially translating it in the future. Continuing on, 16th century, still a lot of experimentation with theoretical experimentation on how to organize the different musical material of a system. So interestingly enough, we have something like the circle of melodies that is related to the cosmological phenomenon or zodiacs. So 12 zodiacs related to these melodies. How, I do not know. I was not able to dig deeper, but nevertheless is evidence that music is tied to that music is not only a musical activity, or was not just a musical activity, it was tied to other things, spiritual and perhaps further. Even in the 20th century, this is from a very famous Egyptian musician and composer who did not only notate his music in or his musical ideas in Western notation, but also his own system. And lastly, the Ottoman Turkic world. Why Ottoman and why not just Turkish as today? Because most of the big developments that are still use today have come from the Ottoman period. They were developed in this very rich historical crossroads between Europe, the Arabic world, and the Iranian world. Firstly, the Ottomans were inspired by, of course, the Arabic treatises of the Islamic Golden Age. So they did start by using some kind of blend of abjad notation. Turkish was also written in Arabic script at the time, before in the early 20th century, it turned into Latin script that we know today. So the Arabic influence is very hefty on the way they write. Some people even, I know some researchers that do not distinguish, like holistically, they do not distinguish between Turkish music from Anatolia and the Arabic world, because they use the same maqams, they use the same instruments, with stylistic and regional differences, but it's very hard to rip them apart from each other. And to finish, I did want to share with you all this superb blog by a musicologist and composer. I think if you just type May My online, May My timeline of music notation, for example, that page will pop up. And it's kind of an ongoing work where he charts the, it's an ambitious blog that charts all the dates, more or less, of notation developments throughout the world. So it could be very interesting. Many things that I did not cover here, you will find there. Armenian notation, for example. There's Korean, there's Japanese, just almost everything you can think of is on that blog. And yes, I wanted to leave more times for questions and answers. So, fire away.
Thank you, Daria. That's super interesting. The images are really cool too, to see. That gives some cool references to the participants. Does anybody have any questions or ideas?
Thank you so much. That was so cool. I really loved all the different types of notation, but I particularly like that Tibetan one. I just wondered if there's any recordings of what it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was digging, because the worst thing I was most afraid of is putting a recording of a chant or hymn that was either not in the style of the regional style of that notation. So I unfortunately cannot correlate the two. But in theory, they are hymns and chants that are universal in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So if we could read what those scores are, we would be able to, correlate them with the recording, but unfortunately.
If I wanted to hear the genre of music, what could I look up?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. You can, what do I have on my Spotify personally or other accounts? I usually type, there are some buzzwords. You can write Tibetan Buddhist rites. That's a good one. There is Buddhist chants, Tibetan Buddhist chants. You could also type Tibetan throat singing, because they share that with the Mongolians. And if you want Tibetan music that is outside of that, outside of the religious, the spiritual sphere, there is a great instrument called the Dramian that you can look up, Dramyin, and that should also give you some idea of the folk music. Yeah, it's a lute. Right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions, or also on the previous lecture of Daria, maybe?
Oh, yes.
Or does anyone have any ideas of what exactly you would be trying to notate for the in this program? And maybe Daria could give some like ideas or some references kind of like feeding off of your pieces, you know? I haven't had a chance to really listen to anything that's been made because it's all in progress, so it's still a big mystery. But does anyone have some ideas?
I mean, like what I was, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a dancer, I'm wearing a green vest. Anyway, like what I was planning on doing was kind of structuring it like a recipe book. So in the ingredients section, I would have like the lists of instruments you would require, like the software sounds that you would want. And then for the rest of it, I would kind of structure it like a chord sheet where I would have notes of chord, well, yeah, chords next to lyrics and be like, you figure it out.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I don't have really anything to add to that. I think that sounds because I didn't tell you all this, but I'm a composer myself and musician. So if I saw something like that, I would appreciate it. Difference. You would. It's good that you give the recipe, but then you say like mix it how you want. That's the point of music, right? So yeah.
That's a cool idea. Does anyone else? Sydney, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm currently in a cafe and it might be a bit loud, so I hope you can hear me clearly.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But great. Yeah, I was thinking of doing something, and I think we were chatting with Tom about this the other day. Is I think something a little bit more, maybe like a bit more abstract or visual or less. And I wondered if you had any examples of things that perhaps captured more like the energy or the emotion of a musical piece, or if that completely falls out of notation in that case, if one's not able to like play the piece from that.
So are you by any chance gravitating towards graphic notation?
What do you mean by that?
Like representing musical sounds either by drawings or some kind of like shapes.
Yeah, I think a little bit more. But I haven't given like I don't have any real concrete ideas, but because I think the pieces that I'm writing in terms of chords and stuff are quite simple. I think I was more focusing on like trying to convey maybe the energy that comes behind playing those two chords or something like that. Yeah.
The energy, I see. So also maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe like the way you would play the chords, like the energy with which you would play those chords, like the dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think a good avenue to start would be graphic notation. Like I think the best thing to keep in mind, I'm sure you all already know this, but I'll say it anyways, is, there are no rules. As long as you clarify what's behind your thought process and what you want, nobody can criticize you. So I would definitely, for inspiration, I would look at graphic notation and then kind of, go from there.
Great, thank you so much.
Well, is there anybody that is struggling with how to notate their music and wanted to just ping pong ideas?
I have a question if no one else is gonna go.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't want to take up all the airtime, so feel free to go, guys. I'm thinking of notating mine with kind of like scales or modes. Like as in this section, like kind of grouped together a certain mode. and then in this section a different mode. And I was just wondering if we've come across anything that does that, or if you've seen any creative ways. Like, I don't just want to draw a box around a scale, you know, like I want to do it kind of partially notated, but graphically I'm going to try and paint some colors behind it as well, so it has a kind of like graphic feel to it, but there is some notation. And I just wondered if you had ideas of like making groupings of modes look nice within a score.
That's a tough one, because whenever we write something down or visualize it, there is a question of space and the relationship between. So it is a tough one. Besides boxes, I mean, I think we did see last week this one way of notating music where it was kind of like the distance between the two ideas you want to be most related to each other. So if you want to say that, if you want to give like the gravity between these different parts is tighter, they're more attracted to each other than these other parts, then perhaps just spatially putting them closer to each other would be my best guess. I think the color idea is wonderful. Black and white is a terrible. It's hard on the eyes. So the color is wonderful. I think that really would give it a third dimension. Yeah, that is as much as I can say. Unfortunately, there hasn't been very much experimentation along. We say there is, we think there is, but at the end of the day, we don't really see it. So, yeah. Did I answer your question all right, or was that helpful?
Yeah, it was helpful. It pointed, gave me some ideas. So thank you.
Okay, good.
Could I ask if, as a musician yourself, you've experimented with different forms of notation that best suit the kind of music you do, and like which ones you found to be most helpful for yourself?
Oh, yes. Great question. When I was writing in a more, because I'm not writing anymore in a Occidental, European format. So I've kind of put notation aside for the time being. But maybe like the last piece I wrote, I had a lot of extended techniques, and I got a book. I forgot which one. Sorry. I could look it up. It's somewhere on the computer, but I did pull up some books on extended techniques because I didn't want to create my own. I thought that would be too much of a burden. But I did use indeterminate notation because I knew the effect I wanted, but it didn't have any specific notes. So like, for example, on the violin or the strings in general. So it was an ensemble piece for woodwinds and strings, and very much more abstract. So I wanted like sounds with harmonics. I wanted very rich, like harmonic glissandis. So I used the very conventional, like maybe 1960s ways of notating. Because as much as I like to be creative, I always say, well, a score has a practical side to it, that if I go too wild, I don't know how classical musicians would take it. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know, I felt like I didn't really answer your question too.
No, but then is it like because you're not so much working with non-Western types of music or genres that you maybe have like relied more on the sort of master tutor format you were telling us about, or?
Today, you mean?
Yeah, or in the sort of not so much like in distancing yourself a little bit from Western notation. Is that sort of the alternative that you've turned to?
Yeah, yes, because I realized I started learning Iranian music 3 years ago, and I was getting a lot of like constructive criticism that I was playing the Setar. I was saying, well, you're playing my professor was like, "You're playing the notes great, the tempo is fine, everything is like it's there, but he's like, this doesn't really set like it was a dance to the ring called a ring, and he was like, nobody would dance to this. Nobody would dance to what you're playing, the way you're playing it." I was like, ouch. He's like, and he's Iranian himself, so he was like, which is strange because a ring is kind of like a mixture between can be traced back to Armenian and Kurdish elements, and I'm both. So he was like, you're the perfect person to play this kind of music, and you're playing it very formatted, like very. And I realized, because I was a pianist for such a long time, that was the problem, and I was also relying heavily, like visually, on music. So it's like, I need to distance myself from all of this, so I can kind of not only get back in touch with my roots, but in a way, unformat myself. Kind of, I'm working on these kind of theories, but kind of like musical decolonization in a way. Yeah, I had to distance myself in order to be able to play my own music, my own culture's music.
That's so interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken in a while. Because also, actually, I was wondering maybe about how our participants could note, like, maybe even in the music, there's an element of performance that could be also something that is a little bit intertwined with the notation. I mean, like, for example, when you're talking about throat singing, you know, or these kinds of other practices or things that can't be so easily felt in like Western notation, like, is there some kind of way that maybe performance was intertwined? And I don't know, maybe this could interest Jordan Edge, just the idea like that, if you have some.
Oh yeah, no, that's wonderful. Yeah, I didn't have time last time. That was my last section, was action notation, at least in the West. But other cultures have used it too. So that essentially boils down to describing the way you want the music to be performed. So not detailing like so much, like if for example, if you're playing a guitar, not detailing exactly like where to touch the frets, like what frets to press down on, but more like how you would, I guess, to borrow someone's words from earlier, the energy with which you would interact, you know, with that instrument, or the way you would. So you, it kind of goes hand in hand, like with extended techniques. So you could say like, I don't know, for action or performance-based notations, they're just very wordy. So you can just be like, slap the, you know, if you just want every note to be slapped, you would physically write that in the score. Or if you want throat singing, but at certain pitches, you could write the pitches and then say, you know, in the style of throat singing. It's as blunt as that. There's no standardized or conventional way of doing it. So.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do more of a kind of like almost like a gameplay thing, like a sonic theater kind of piece, where I would like map out something from the tracks that would become completely abstract and not really, they would have some inner meaning towards what I've written already, but then I would probably like break it down into like words into symbols, and then into some kind of like character-based like gameplay, or like sonic theater was the idea. So like different bodies performing different parts of a track, or like something just to improvise from completely.
Like the musical material itself, or
so I would use the musical material itself, I think, to make the symbolism more like the gameplay thing, like a sonic gameplay thing, and then I would leave the rest. I would give instructions and then leave the rest, like the sounds and stuff, to be made by instructions. I wouldn't necessarily put like use a guitar, or like nothing very specific, quite abstract.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I need to start like mapping out more and doing it, but these are initial ideas. But I definitely like the idea of extended technique, or using body in different ways, or like things that'll enhance or deconstruct sounds or change them from like movement, or those kinds of ideas is what I'm thinking about.
Do you want to provide, like, do you want to be very precise about it and provide like an algorithm for the combination, or is it more, or even different algorithms to be like, this is the different ways I want you to precisely mix these elements, but you can choose which elements you want to mix together?
Yeah, that sounds really what I was thinking. Like, yeah, like there are a lot of set elements there, but you choose how you perform them. So if someone likes to move while they make sound, do that. Or if someone wants to embody this idea of a character and make some sound or sing, do that. But I don't want it to be too complex, very like quite simple symbolism on a kind of map, like a game board or something.
Yeah, that's really cool. Intuitive, right?
Yeah, like placed in like a room, and then people have a space, and then it's improvisers are brought along and they like interpret it how they want. There's a good thing, Omsk Social Club, that are based in Berlin, that do these live theatrical gameplay performances. So everyone will like performers will sign up to come and do this thing. They don't exactly know what they're going to be drawn into at the start, but they know they've been told certain things. So you get like a preparation set of tasks, like make a character. What does this character do? Become this character for 2 hours a day before you come to the workshop.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then you get there and it's like these long kind of drawn out like LARP things or RPGs, but you're like in there, and they dress up and they inhabit these characters and like bodies for like, sometimes they do quite long ones, like 24 hours, and then public are like invited to like watch it in a gallery or like those kind of things.
Were they inspired by any chance off of Dungeons and Dragons? Because it sounds a lot like that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's all kind of this, it's like weird. They're looking at all these kinds of games and stuff and then making it quite contemporary and quite like arty. But they're great. It's really good.
Yeah, I definitely encourage I think that's a great idea to have a more audience interaction, which is missing in the cultures of the West. So yeah, excited to see how you would pull it off.
Yeah, no, I'm yeah, thank you.
Cool, sounds interesting. And Anna Maria, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, hi, sorry. Yeah, I was kind of thinking, because I don't really write, play instruments or kind of write music or read music. I was just going to write my lyrics out as a physical, like focus more on the visual things, because I make digital art and a lot of kind of multimedia visual art stuff. So I'd focus on the visual side a bit more and make a spread that's got like the words like written with like graphics that I would make with the words, and then like design it visually to be more received as a for the words to be received more as like how they sound melodically being spoken out loud. And I wouldn't really add any, I don't know how to add notations, and I wouldn't really be doing that part of it, you know.
Is it meant to be a musical work or just a spoken?
It would be lyrics of a song. Yeah.
Of a song that you wrote, or of a song?
Yes.
I see. And where would the music come from the song you wrote? Are you working with a composer, like a co-songwriter? Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Like all the songs I've got out are produced by someone else. I don't produce them.
Right. I see. Yeah. My question for you is, does the music need to be notated? Because that, you know, just like the Iranians, like, we don't need to notate our music. So, you know, if it's only the lyrics and the graph, I think that's, you know, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I was just going to focus on the part of it that I can do and I'm good at, which is the digital, like the visual design of it, and then just put the words there as lyrics, as written out lyrics.
Yeah.
But, thank you.
Yeah, or if any, I don't know if because you're a singer, so just like they would do in the Middle Ages in Europe, or, you know, the Tibetans were doing, if you ever experiment with improvising your melody on top of a preconceived, then I think those very beautiful curves and shapes would be your best friend, to be honest.
Yeah, so I understand. So you mean like to put visual lines and shapes under each lyric representing how it would be sung?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can look at that.
You know, what it means to you and how, because I guess eventually it would be idiosyncratic. It would just be for you. So how would I, you know, how do I think
I guess you wouldn't be able to, like, I wouldn't be able to make something that I would give to someone to then perform or play. It would just be something that someone would look at and take in visually with their eyes and read in their head, you know?
Absolutely. Or if you really have some diehard fans, they will want to learn, they would want to know how you think and what your creative process is, and then they will delve deep into there, and then I'm sure you'll get a lot of emails and phone calls like, well, what were you thinking when you drew this squiggle? And that's wonderful too. I really like that kind of personal relationship.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, thank you. I'll keep that in mind when I'm designing it.
Thanks. Yeah, that sounds really cool. It makes me think of the squiggly kind of visual notations you were showing us. Like, inscribing that into lyrics is actually pretty cool, because it's true that it's not just the producer who's making the song. I mean, like, you're singing it in different ways, but not like, you know, not talking it. So it is actually cool to recognize that, like, as Daria is saying, that like you're an instrument, and it connects well with the question of Ines in the chat, who said, hi, I'm very interested on voice as an instrument and was wondering how notation informed that practice.
Ooh, it's actually the other way around, to be honest. In my opinion, is that voice informed notation. It's actually, I wanted to kind of tie this in, and it's kind of like coming back to me. Someone asked me, I forgot who it was exactly. Someone asked me, like, was Islamic music, like when they're reciting the Quran, have they notated that? And the answer is no, but they have shown the stresses. Like, all notation started from a vocal practice, as far as we know, stressing the syllables of what was to be sung, because people would forget, oh, like, I want you to stretch this syllable or this vowel at this precise moment in the chant. And that was all voice. So someone would hear that and then notate exactly where all that would happen. So like, I would want like an ah and not ah. And that notation developed from there, really. Later on, I think, like, if you look at opera, like in my experience, opera singers do complain a lot about like how music is written, because either it's like written badly for their range, because composers are not usually singers, which I think singing is one of the most primordial things you can do as a musician. So like, everybody should be able to sing somewhat well, so notation has often informed it badly, and kind of give bad habits. It kind of formatted, I think, at least in the Western tradition, it formatted singers to a certain way. And I think that's why popular music, jazz singing, like scatting, for example, is kind of a rejection of all that. They're like, I don't want this format anymore. That's killing my ornamentation. It's killing my range. It's killing the the timbre, the quality of the timbre of my voice, because I'm developing certain habits that I normally wouldn't. The dangers of intellectualizing anything, to be honest. Did that kind of answer your question, Ines? Cool.
Cool, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Daria.
Pleasure.
I don't know if you have any like website or something you want to share with the participants, or even just your email if you're open to that,
Yes.
to keep the conversation going or for them to follow your work.
Yes. Here's my email. So if you have any questions, just feel free to shoot me an email. I love talking music. My work is still in progress. I recorded a lot of stuff, and I'm in the mixing and mastering stage, which it takes forever. So, to be announced.
Well, I can't wait, because since I'm lucky enough to be in the same city as you, if you have any concerts, I will definitely go. And maybe some of the participants, if they're ever passing through Paris, will be interested. So
Yes.
if you ever set up your newsletter, let us know.
Will do. Will do.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Daria. We have our next lecturer who jumped on already. So if you want to stay with us, you can. But if you have other things to get to, I understand.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attention, and for University of Leningrad, especially you, Chloe, for recommending me for this. And I will leave you to your next lecture. It was a pleasure. Please don't hesitate to contact me. I want to hear what you're all doing. So
Cool. Thank you,
Bye.
Daria. Bye. Awesome. So I'm just going to end the